Uno por el sample, dos por el scratch, tres por los beats que no producen cash. Uno por el sample, dos por el scratch, tres por los beats que no producen cash.
My name is Lourdes Branch. I'm 37 years old. I am from originally Georgetown, Guyana. I immigrated here with my family when I was 4, and we went to Harlem for a little bit, but moved to Brooklyn, and I grew up in East Flatbush in Vanderveer Projects, and I'm a Brooklyn girl through and through. You know, I didn't really know at the time that we were in a, more of an impoverished upbringing. Like I had a happy childhood. I had a lot of cousins around. First of all, I have 30 first cousins on my mom's side alone. Like there's a lot of us, and it's a lot of girls, and we're a large, loud Guyanese family, and we would have Christmases together. We always had gatherings. Like my mom was like really good at making sure our house was meticulous, and like we had everything that we needed. So I didn't know what the world outside really was, but it was rough. It was Lil' Kim and Biggie's Brooklyn in the 90s, like everything they sung about, drugs, crimes, and capers. We also had the blessing of growing up in church. So my mother was very particular about making sure that we were raised in the Lord and raised in church. We spent a lot of time together, and we were provided for and cared for.
My name is Singleton. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, mostly in Flatbush. I'm married, 33 years and 8 months. I have 2 children, 1 grandson. I'm recently retired. I'm 62 from ACS, Administration for Children's Services, after 38 years. I'm trying to enjoy it, the retirement.
My name is Zaire Singleton. I am 29 years old. I'm born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and I currently teach special education in high school. And this is my mother, Zanae Singleton.
I think that growing up, I had the best of both worlds. I have 8 siblings. I'm like the middle child, so we didn't need to have company all the time because we had each other. As far as friends and things like that, we were taught to put God first and all that we do. And we were taught to respect our elders. But it was good. We had a lot of fun. We're a very close-knit family to this day. Where we were on Bedford Avenue, back then on our block, it was mixed neighborhood. And it was very quiet. The crime rate was low. But if you walk a couple of blocks to Flatbush or the other side going toward Vanderveer, it might get a little more busy. But I still consider it safe. I mean, I wasn't afraid.
But I think it has a lot to do with the fact that the community itself knew each other and had a relationship.
Right. It was a very close-knit neighborhood and community. And as a matter of fact, my husband lived around the corner. My now husband lived around the corner. So we were friends since we were 9, since we moved here. We both moved in around the same time. After we got married, we moved into his parents' house. On the first floor is my mother-in-law and my father-in-law. The second floor was myself and my husband. And then as my children came along, they both grew up there. So it was wonderful. Living with my in-laws, it was a beautiful thing. We were all family. We just around the corner. So holidays, we were able to, instead of Christmas picking one, we went to both. Mm-hmm. Christmas, Thanksgiving, we just do this at this time, do that at that time. Remember, the families actually coordinated so that they could happen. We would leave this family's house and the whole family would go to that family's house, and vice versa.
So I am the youngest of 3 from my mom and my dad, and my siblings are Liama. She is 7 years older than me. And then my older brother, Olin, he is 10 years older than me. And we were happy kids. I remember we played games, we laughed a lot. And we were just excited about America. We loved being around our cousins, loved our parents. but we definitely experienced the trauma of fatherlessness and what that does to a family. There was a period of time where my parents separated and my father just stopped coming around. Like, he would pick my brother up from school, and I remember one day, like, he told my brother that he would come and get him, and he just never showed up. And from that moment, I could see the shift and the change in my brother, where he stopped going to school. He started getting into trouble a lot more. He took on an anger that wasn't his own, and he just became more hardened and more willing to be led and influenced by his friends, as opposed to wanting to go to church or wanting to just be with family. But then also feeling the weight and the responsibility of being the only man in the house. He wanted to make sure my mother was always good and that we were provided for. So I think, like, he felt like he had to provide for us and he had to take care of us. And when you're 16, 17 years old, like, you don't have a way to make money or do anything. So there's definitely the call to, like, get involved in things that you definitely should have. So he became this person out of a sense of survival and out of a sense of loss with, not having my dad around and that being his hero. So his goals changed, his affect changed, and that just started a journey of his incarceration.
We had just come in the house coming from a furniture store. And so my husband and I brought the children in. And instead of us going upstairs like we usually do, because it was early, we stopped downstairs. And then he had to go back out for something. So we all stayed downstairs. We said I'd wait until he gets back and we'd go up. A few minutes later, there was a knock at the door. And my oldest daughter, thought that it was her father. So she opened the door, and in came the robbers. And immediately they knocked me to the floor because I was coming right behind her because she was going to the door, but she got there before me. And they started popping my chains and taking my jewelry and telling me to stay down, don't get up. In the meantime, my daughter is running to the back to tell her grandparents that, somebody's here. She still didn't understand what was going on at the time. And they're like, what? And everybody's still carrying on like they were, while they were in the front doing everything they wanted to do to me. So when they started to go toward the back, they were telling me to stay down on the floor. And I'm like, I'm not staying on this floor. I went to the back to make sure my family was okay. And so they held the gun on me the whole time. And when we got to the bedroom, they started saying what they wanted. And they were asking for the money in the house and the jewelry. And they knew there was a safe. And in the safe was the church's, my mother-in-law was the treasurer, I believe, or the secretary, but she had some money in the safe that belonged to the church. And she also they had bonds that they had been saving for years of work. And some jewelry, things like that. Initially, the safe did not get opened, but then they had put a gun to Zair's head, who was sitting on the bed with my father-in-law, who was in bed. They tied him up, they taped his mouth. She started crying, and they were telling me to shut that effing child up. And I was very angry, and I was like, I'm not shutting nobody up. This is a baby, she's gonna cry, because you don't belong here doing something like this. What are you doing? Who told you about this and that? And they was like, just shut up. We just want this safe. Just open up this safe. And my mother-in-law, finally, she did open it, and they got what they wanted. They asked for a bag. And then they saw her, she had a leather briefcase that she had for years that she carried to and from the church with her notes and things like that. They took that and they put everything they wanted into that bag. And then they told us to stay, all of us to stay in the back and not to move until whatever time they said. And then they ran out the front And as they're running out the front, my husband's coming in. Had no idea of what just happened. And he came in and he's like, hey, yo, what's going on? And then he said, what? He couldn't believe it. And then he tried to go back out, but he didn't see them. But it was by the grace of God that he wasn't there, because my husband was a correction officer and he had a gun. So that could have meant a shootout, somebody, hurt, dead, whatever. And, in hindsight, sometimes you say, oh, well, she was here, but I'm glad he wasn't, because you don't know who would have got hurt.
I was too at the time. I just remember visuals. So I remember someone was tied up. I remember a gun to my grandmother's head. I do remember her being very calm through the whole thing. And one of the most vivid pictures I have is her because the safe was somewhere on the floor or something like that. And she was on the floor opening the safe with the gun to her head. And yeah, that's what I most vividly remember.
Just really angry that she had to see and go through something like that. And I always wondered, how long is this memory going to be with her? It was horrific. It was a lot. It was just unbelievable, because we never would have expected anything like that to happen. Not in the neighborhood, not period. The same night we called the police, went to the police. We actually went down. They came and we left with them to go to the precinct to start looking at photos and things like that. We went through 3 books, and we were able to identify Olin Branch, and I think another one. Yeah, they said we're gonna find them.
So I remember being in the house, and it was a regular night like any other night. I'm at home with my mom and my sister and my brother, and it was a peaceful night, but that peace was disrupted when the police stormed our apartment. And the police, they're coming in and they're attacking my brother and they're pulling him out, and we're not allowed to talk to him. We can't figure out what's going on. They're yelling at my mom and yelling at us. And I remember not understanding what was happening or why. I just remember my mother being devastated and crying because she's like, I don't know where my child is. I don't know what they're doing with my child. I don't know where they're taking him. I don't know where he's going to be housed. I don't know how I'm going to do this. Is my child going to come back home? So I just remember there just being a lot of tears and a lot of confusion and a great sense of loss.
My name is May Branch Edie. I'm the mother of Olin, Liama, and Lourdes. And the police raided my home. I always play my gospel music because that's my faith. I always sing and pray my gospel music. And I was in the kitchen and I heard this loud banging on the door, and they barged right in. And my son was sleeping on the cot in the living room, and they grabbed him, and I asked him, well, what's going on? Because there's a big confusion going on, commotion. I'm like, what's happening? They said, they just come to take him. So I said, well, what did he do? They couldn't tell me. They just said they have to take him and he will be back later in the day. But she never came back to that house. I was shaking, I was nervous because I was like, what's going on? I was there running, panicking. I tried calling to find out what's going on, where he was. Nobody would tell me anything, and I couldn't sleep the night. I was just a basket case because not knowing where he was. I didn't find out anything for 2 days before I was told that he was in the downtown Brooklyn, the holding place, and I had to go down there to find out, to see what's going on, where he was. Eventually, I was told that he was charged with armed robbery, and I was basically breaking down the whole day, trying to keep my composure because I never expected anything like that. I saw him when they were passing him through the court. When I saw him pass through, I cried because he had the handcuffs on him, and he looked terrified too. And I was terrified because not knowing what was going to happen to him.
The trial started. I was able to speak, and I said, wrote out something that I wanted to say to him and his family, and I just wanted justice to be served, because my whole family was at risk and traumatized, especially my kids. But everybody remained in fear for a while.
When I found out that he was guilty, I cried. It broke my heart, because when they tell me 30 years, I'm like, 30 years? For what? I felt the sentence was very, very harsh. I'm not condoning any wrongdoing, but 30 years for robbery. People commit murder and they don't get 30 years in prison. So I was very, very upset and very, very heartbroken with that sentence. Life without Olin from a family was not the same. It took a lot from us. Me as a mom, I had to work, make sure that Liam and Lourdes were taken care of. They had to go to school, and then I have to be focusing on taking care of Olin. I went to almost every prison upstate New York to visit him. I leave my home from 4:30 in the morning, never get back home till 8 o'clock at night, having to go to work the next day. But I did all of that just to make sure that he had someone there, and that to help him mentally and emotionally, because there was no one else there in his life. And in the meantime, that impacted our family also, because it wasn't easy to be going up. And when you go to the prison, the officers were not very nice. They treated you like you were a criminal too.
They shove you around. They're aggressive and they're rude, and you have to be just demoralized and dehumanized just for the privilege of being able to see your loved one. Your loved one is in prison being treated like an animal, because there have been points where my brother has been assaulted by the police. There was one time where they were trying to transport him out of his cell to another, and I guess because my brother wasn't moving quickly enough, several officers rushed him, and they beat him so badly that he was unrecognizable. They broke his jaw. My mother went to see him, and she said she didn't recognize her own child.
My son's face was so badly beaten, swollen. This temple was broken. We had to do surgery. We had to use a straw. We had to suck on candy. He couldn't eat. Those officers, even in the corrections department, they say Department of Correction. What are you correcting? You're not correcting anything there. You're just beating them, doing all sorts of things. I experienced it. I write several letters. Nobody paid anything.
When I moved to live in Baltimore for school, and I was robbed. My home was raided, but I wasn't there when it happened. So it was like, now this is the second time that this has happened, but like I was more so grateful that I wasn't there, because I was there the first time. And I think it impacts what I believe my purpose is in life, because I did have a gun to my head, and so it's like I'm still living here for a reason, and so like it gives me a little bit of like motivation for purpose to do the right thing.
I've changed in some really great ways and in some really poor ways. I now have a lot more compassion for people who who are the dregs of society and who are on the fringes of society. But I think also I became fearful and angry and distrusting of the world, because I know that the world can crush you. He would write appeals and he would, petition. His lawyers would try, and every appeal that he wrote would be denied. And there's just a sense of that denial that happens over and over and over again that takes away your hope. And it changed our family dynamic, because this big, happy, jovial family that I came from with tons of extended cousins, it was like everyone shunned us. Everyone kind of gave up on us because you have the son in jail. And it just became a time of huge secrecy. Like, don't tell anyone, like, you have a brother in jail. So you're carrying the weight of that secret. You're carrying the weight of the sentencing. This isn't the way life should be.
I came down to Brooklyn for Father's Day. I'm in a car accident. I was at a red light and a city bus rear-ended me. And so because it was a city bus that happened, I had to do like physical therapy, and like the settlement, all that stuff had to be in New York. And so I kind of had to move back to New York. So now I'm back living with my parents. And I was going to the same church that I grew up in. So we were going every Sunday, and my bishop at the time, she taught at Alliance Theological Seminary. And she was like, so, you graduated, what are you gonna do? Like, what's your plans? And I told her, I was like, I thought about doing agriculture, but I don't feel like going to school right now. She's like, oh, well, you should think about going to seminary. I was like, seminary? She's like, yeah, pray about it. I was like, I don't know if I want to pray about it because I don't really go to seminary. And then I end up just saying yes. So it's like, okay, God, I don't know what's going on, what you're trying to do, what you're trying to tell me, but I've learned in life to stop trying to figure it out and just go with the spirit, because you figuring it out, you waste a lot of time figuring stuff out. I got accepted to seminary. It was one of the best educational experiences that I've had. I had a class, I believe it was called The Church as a Cultural Social Institution. I think that was the name of the class. And we had to visit different churches and write papers on them. And so I went on the computer, I Googled churches in Brooklyn, and Bridge Church was the first one that popped up. There was a thing called city groups. And so I was like, let me go to the city group first, because it was different. And my mom came with me to the city group because I didn't want to go by myself. I didn't know where. She's like, I'll go with you. So went to city group first, met a bunch of really great people, met Pastor James there. And they were talking about what happened in church service the week or that Sunday before. And they mentioned that there was a series for mass incarceration. And so we agreed then to check out the service on Sunday. And so when we went, my mom came again with me, and it was end of service, and Lourdes was talking about her brother who was incarcerated and his story.
Pastor Rasul asked me to participate in the sermon series that he was given at the time. It was on restorative justice. He wanted me to share the testimony of my family because the church was aware that I had an incarcerated family member. And at the time, I was not interested. I did not want to be vulnerable. I did not want to share the weight of my family's testimony in public. But I said yes, and it was a Sunday morning. At the end of the sermon, I was called up to share about my brother, and I remember saying his inmate number, 97A5852. And I tried to paint the picture of what it was like, for him to be incarcerated, and then my family to walk through this really challenging time and offer that testimony.
I said, wow, this sounds like my story. This sounds like something that happened to me. In my head, I wasn't saying anything out loud. And so I said, I wonder if they're going to say who the person was that actually did it.
And I gave the details of his crime. I gave the details of his sentencing.
And then Olin Branch, I was like, what? I said, this is him. I said, this is the person that, invaded our home.
She whispered to me, like, that was the person. I was like, oh, wow. And it was just like, I was just trying to process everything, because this is, if we are going to call it a coincidence, it was the biggest coincidence that I ever experienced in my whole life, because I literally just Googled this place.
I just thought it was a miracle that, I would get to see and meet where this person came from and try to get some insight to, what may have been happening around that time, or what the people, the people that he came from were about and who they were. And I said I couldn't leave without telling him.
At the end of the service, a woman walked up to me and she was like, is your last name Branch? And I'm like, yes. And she was like, is your brother's name Olin? Yes. And she says to me, I think I'm the victim of that crime. And the room stopped. Noise stopped. Like, it was like time ceased in that moment. And it was just the two of us in a moment. And I was just like, how? Like, what do you mean? And she proceeds to walk me through the details of being at his sentencing and being there to hear that he received 30 years and what that was like for her. And I'm in shock because I don't know what her response is going to be. I don't know what she's going to say. I don't know if she's going to come angrily. I don't know if she's bitter. I don't know if this is going to be a moment of attack or antagonism. I don't know what weight she's carrying, or what our interactions would be. So I held my breath and braced myself for what she was going to say. And she says, tell your brother I forgive him.
I just said that, if God could forgive me for all the things that I've done and people that I know have done, who am I not to forgive him? And she just broke down and started crying and bawling, and she kept saying that she was sorry, and I was trying to let her know that this is not you, it wasn't you. And, people do things when they're younger, even when they're older, but you do things you regret. Everybody deserves a second chance.
The shame of knowing that someone that you love is guilty, and the judgment that you experience throughout your life for that. And then to be met by the person who your loved one impacted or sinned against, and for that person to extend you a level of compassion and forgiveness and to offer words of grace in a place where you're supposed to receive grace, right? Church is the place that you're supposed to come and receive grace. But to actually be given that was a gift that I can't really explain.
A burden was like lifted. I got closure that day with the whole in regard to the whole thing.
I told my mother, like, Mom, I met the victim of Olin's crime. She was like, what? How?
I was actually surprised because I was never expecting that we would ever be in contact with any one of these people. I never heard from them, never saw them or anything like that. But when she told me that she spoke with her and she said she forgave him, and it gave me some peace in my heart that made me feel a little better in my spirit. And he's very, he's remorseful. He took it with love. And I think that has helped him to move on.
When someone is being released, there is always the option that someone who was a victim of their crime can write a victim statement asking that the person not be released. But through this moment of forgiveness, Ms. Singleton did state that she would not write a letter requesting that he not be paroled.
I was like, no, he shouldn't have to do anymore. And so, yeah, I was definitely okay with that and would not stand in the way.
So my brother was able to be paroled and he was able to be released. And he's free. He's not in America, unfortunately, because the criminal justice system is the way that it is. My brother was deported to our hometown of Georgetown, Guyana, but he does have the opportunity to rebuild his life. So he is 100% experiencing the world again, all over. It's all new. And he was released to Guyana after 25 years. And I haven't been back to Guyana in 25 years. So because, he was released, I decided to go back with my mom and my aunt to see him. And I got to see him at the airport. And this is the first time that we get to hug in freedom. This is the first time that we get to laugh and ride in a car together, leave the same place, and no one has to tell us that, oh, you can't touch, or no one has to say that your time's up.
The first time I saw my son as a free man, it was tears of joy. He had this big smile on his face, and we hugged and we laughed. We were so happy. It's only God. It's only God.
We go through a whole bunch of things in life, and sometimes decisions and actions are kind of forced upon us because we don't have no other way, especially minorities living in America. So it's probably not something that he wanted to do in the moment, but felt like he had to do. And so you gotta extend that grace.
I just want to thank God for His grace and mercy upon my life. Because of God's goodness and His mercy, I'm able to get through life. And now I'm happy. My son is not here with me. I would have liked him to be here with our family. But thank God, he is doing great in Guyana. God has been so, so good. So, so good to him. Because, he's been able to get a job for the almost 2 years he's in Guyana. A lot of people probably didn't expect him to go down there and they think he would have go down there and just messed up. But he's doing good. He has a lot of goals and he's working towards those goals. It was not easy. It was not easy. But I'm still standing because of God's grace. I tell anybody, love the Lord. He is so, so good. And He will keep you. No matter what you're going through, He's there for you. And He'll see you through.
I let go and let God. So I know that if He brought me to it, He's going to get me through it. So I'm not a worrier. And I don't fear a lot of things. So, because I know He's got my back and He's got my family. And so, some people say that's not good. Like, oh, you don't never want to do nothing. You don't want to retaliate. I had those days. Been there, done that. Didn't work for me. This is working. So I'm going to stick with it.
With the nature of humans, when we're talking about forgiveness, people always talk about when they're wronged and, oh, I'm cutting this person off. They did something to me. Like, no, I can't forgive them. Like, forgiveness is so hard. But we don't ever think about when we need forgiveness, or like when we are in need of grace or in need of compassion. So I think standing in proxy for my brother and receiving the forgiveness of someone that was harmed by him or his choices, it was the embodiment of the gospel of like, when Jesus dies for our sins, he does it perfectly without sin. And he takes on our wrongness and our identity as perpetrators. And he gives us his identity as not guilty, as if we've never sinned. And he extends that forgiveness and that grace, and then decides to bear our shame and bear our guilt and bear the weight of the things that we have done. So in this moment of receiving forgiveness from someone that experienced wrong by someone that I love, it just was a clear picture of the Lord of like, that's how I see you all the time. I don't see you through the lens of guilt. I don't see you through the lens of shame. I always see you through the lens of forgiveness. You don't have to carry secrecy. You don't have to carry guilt. You don't have to feel like the world is always against you, because I don't see you that way. I see you through the eyes of forgiveness and love.